because because defensive shell selection depends on nonlinear interactions. We did not go with logistic regression because it assumes a linear interactions, and we did not go with XGBoost or any gradient boosting because we believe that we don't need such an aggressive overfitting or underfitting. And this confirmed our suspicion that game states or game factors like time remaining and field position correlate closely to high usage.
Yeah, so we're going to go over the overall too high usage through the trends by down and distance, score differential, field position, and receiver alignment.
So here are the top 10 teams and the bottom 10 teams in the league that use too high. So we have Minnesota Vikings, and then our Super Bowl champion, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Bills. So these three teams are the three teams that have too high usage above 50%. And then if you look at the bottom 10 the bottom 10 teams, we have the men heavy defenses like Cleveland Browns. They stay away from too high usage. And what downs is too high use. So mostly defenses run too high when offenses are far away from the chain, and this includes a first down, especially after penalties, second and long, and third and passing situations. And then they move the safety down when offenses are near a first down, like third and short and fourth down.
So game situation also affects it. When teams have a lead, they're going to sit back in too high because it is far better at protecting against explosives. They're not going to let teams win back that margin in one play.
The too high usage by area of the field, basically when we're backed up on our own goal line, you'll see a lot more aggressive play. They'll go single high, not much usage. Then when we get about in friendly territory, defenses will go too high quite often. The usage rate will be up. Then when we're about midfield, you'll see the tendencies go down a little bit. Then it creeps back up when we're in about high red between the 40-20 yard line. Safeties camp out in the end zone, and then near the goal line, defenses stack the box, and there's not much too high.
Do defenses react to formation? We found absolutely. Heavy passing formations such as trips and slot and spread, even balance, saw a lot of too high usage because too high is a lot better at protecting against the deep pass, and the deep pass comes from these formations a lot more. But what formations beat too high? This begins part 2 of our offensive attack strategies against too high. Well, we found those same formations that saw a lot of too high, they saw a lot of too high for a reason because they are very good passing formations. So bunch, spread, balanced, trips, and twins are all very, very, very good at beating too high. Those are the best formations to pass against too high. Bunches are clearly the best on this graph, and they are probably there because they can break quarters rules. These man-match systems that teams like the Vikings use quite a bit aren't built as well for 3-by-1 formations such as bunch, and then spread has so many receivers on the field, it's spreading the defense out. So now that we know what formations can beat too high, what concepts can beat too high? We know, obviously, the NFL is a very heady sport. It's about offensive and defensive genius. It's not just guys smashing into each other. So designing plays is a massive part of winning, and these we thought was the best to look at against too high. We took these route concepts, route combinations, both half field and full field, and we tried to define them inside of the code given the route data. So we found that these 5 concepts, dagger, drive, and levels, which were in the same bucket because they're hard to differentiate from each other, Yankee, Toss and shock, again, hard to differentiate from each other, and flood were the 5 best concepts at beating too high through the air. Dagger, we defined as the outside receiver running an in route, and then an inside receiver running a streak. Drive and levels, we defined as 2 receivers on the same side of the field, one running an in route, and the further one outside running a shallow. Yankee, we defined as 2-man concept with a post on one side of the field and a crosser on the other. Toss and shock, we defined as an outside receiver running a hitch and an inside receiver running a vertical, whether that be a slot fade or a seam route. And then flood, we defined very broadly because flood is really just about having all 3 levels of the field covered, 1 deep route, 1 crossing route, or 1 deep route, 1 intermediate route, and 1 short route, all on one side of the field. All of these are great for spreading out the defense and beating too high.
So, like Victor was just saying, there are systematic ways that you can attack two high and you can attack one high. They are not perfect coverages. There are certain route concepts, formations that are consistently more effective against them. So, defense has got to adjust somehow. And one big way they do that is they disguise their coverages. They put two safeties up top and then they rotate one down, or more rarely, you start with one high safety and you move into a two high oriented coverage. You can see that defenses disguise their look about 30% of the time. And adding on to that countering factor, are top five concepts that attack two high, not great against one high look. So potentially that could be a foil for us. We'll get more into that later. However, one factor that plays into our favor is that it's much easier to go from a two high shell into a one high coverage than a one high into two high, because if you go from one high into two high, a lot of the time you need a quarterback fully wheeling his hips around, working into a deep half. It's just harder to run. We'll dive deep into that later.
Yeah, so as he said, more than 75% of disguised coverage goes from two high, the two high shell, into a one high coverage. And of that 75%, 60% of those coverages land in cover three rather than the man coverages that make up the rest of the one high coverages. And against cover three, our concepts Hostage Shock, Yankee, and Drive all have an EPA per play above 0.05 versus both two high and cover three. So when we're facing this disguised coverage, we have these concepts that we can go to that can beat both of those coverages. We have two high beaters and one high beaters. Now, a problem may be man coverage, but we can use pre-snap motion to decipher whether or not they're in man coverage. So we can try and tell if they're in zone or man. And if they're running a lot of disguised coverages, we have these three concepts that we know can beat all of the zone coverages that we might see, whether they're in a disguised look or not.
However, passing the ball against two high is only half the battle. You got to run it. And when defenses keep the two safeties up high, the run game becomes much more effective, especially in one of our most exciting findings. You add an RPO tag onto that. You have a little bubble screen or tunnel screen working on the backside, occupies that area of the field, and those run concepts become much more effective just by tagging an RPO with it.
So how do we execute these run plays that we want to run? We know that two high is very good. How are we going to run it? Well, we found that actually some of the best run formations come from the formations that were good against the pass in two high shells. Bunch, spread, and trips. When they're going against two high shells, the run EPA per play was by far the highest in those. And we think that that is because you're spreading out the linebackers, the nickel defenders. They have to go further outside. You're horizontally stretching them across the field. That leaves less defenders in the box and more lanes for the running backs to get one-on-one choices and make the remaining box defenders wrong. These are the formations that we want to run and pass out of, because whenever we're able to disguise our intention of passing or running, that makes it a lot tougher on the defense. And if we can run and pass exceptionally from these three formations, that is the optimal strategy.
Just like in the pass game, however, defenses aren't just going to be stagnant. If we are running the ball down their throat, they're going to look to do something about it. And what they're going to look to do is they're going to play base defense. They're going to put three linebackers on the field. However, you can still experience some success running against base looks out of two high. But what we're going to do especially is we are just going to run path option you even harder, because that player that gets subbed off when you move to a base defense, that is the nickel defender. One of the biggest reasons that we're seeing an increase in the importance and the usage of big nickel defenders in the NFL is because they are so good at taking away RPOs. You make that guy a linebacker, it is easy to beat him in space. So that's going to be a big component of our game plan.
Absolutely. As you can see there, RPOs are a lot better against two high shells when ran with an RPO tag and runs, but they are also incredible in passes. They have a similar rate. Passing with an RPO tag has a similar EPA per play rate as normal passes do against two high shell. So it's enormously effective to pass and run against base from an RPO look. And of course, we have these five concepts that we identified, these great concepts for beating two high, but we can't just run five rep concepts the entire game. We need stuff for certain situations. So we looked into it and we found that most of our concepts were decent deep. Most of the ones that we looked at were very good whenever it was second and long, third and long. So we wanted to find the concepts that were really going to make us our money on third and three. We've got to have a first down. What are we going to go to? Well, these four concepts, drive and levels, Hoss and Shock, Hank, which is curl flats, and stick, all were increased by more than 0.1 EPA per play when there was less than 5 yards to go to get the first down. Especially Hank and Stick, two route combos that weren't particularly great against two high coverages overall, rose tremendously whenever the distance was shortened to the first down. So whenever we get into those short distances, 3rd and 3, 2nd and 1, we might want to run a little bit more of these plays. Whereas drive and levels, Hots and Shock, both of them were very good against too high. They're even better in those short situations. We can run those anytime we want. So how are we attacking too high? We are going to utilize the passing concepts dagger, drive, and levels, Yankee, Hoss and Shock, and flood out of the formations bunch, spread, balance, trips, and twins. We are going to run most of our offense out of these formations, and these are going to be the base concepts that we want to attack. And you may say, like, you can't just run an offense out of 5 concepts. And of course, we have the Hank and we have Stick to run short. And it is very difficult to run these out of 5 concepts. But when we have these 5 formations, that varies a lot more what these concepts are doing. It may not look like the same play when it's run out of different formations, but it really is. A lot of NFL teams really just stick to 10 to 15 base concepts with obviously a lot of stuff thrown in there. But with play action tags, RPO tags, and different formations, all designed to confuse the defense. That is what we want to do.
And then in order to disguise run pass tendencies, we can primarily run out of bunch, spread, and trips.
Yeah, we're gonna run as much as they're gonna give us, and if the base personnel begins to appear, RPOs are gonna be our best bet.
And then when we get to 3rd down, we're going to focus on moving the chains. We're going to use stick and shorter passing concepts, find the space between zones. This is one of the reasons that I'm glad that we focus so much on EPA per play and not just total yardage, because total yardage is always going to favor the concepts that attack farther down the field. Sometimes 3rd and 3, you're looking to pass against it too high, throw it 4 yards, move the chains.
Next, we're going to move into part 3. And for this part, we pick the Bills for our offensive team. And the reason we pick the Bills is because they are by far the best offensive team against our 3 choices. They have, for the EPA pass versus too high, Bills have 0.3, Patriots have 0.2, and Chiefs have 0.06. They are also the best rushing team in the NFL this season.
So we started off by taking a deep dive into what the Vikings do defensively. How do they want to attack us and make us have to gain these extra yards? So we found whenever they're defending against the pass, they run nickel about 50% of the time, and they're in base a very high amount, about 36% of the time, leaving not much dime personnel on the table. And that base usage rate increases whenever they're running too high shells. A little more than 40% of the time they're running too high. It is in base personnel, and they obviously still run a lot of nickel. And as you can see on this table, they're very good at defending the pass. They're very good at defending the pass from too high in both base and nickel. In fact, they're tremendous at defending the pass from base. They're one of the best in the league. They're not very good at defending dime. That's why we don't expect to see much of that. So what formations worked against the Vikings? What formations didn't work against the Vikings? Now, we didn't put too much stock into these individual formations against the Vikings because only so many plays can be ran out of too high for an entire year, and there are a lot of formations. It was a relatively small sample size. But we still believe that this will provide us a general idea of what the Vikings may or may not be good against, and maybe what we can lean on a little bit more while still sticking true to what we wanted to do in part 2. We see here that the trips and spread and single were all very good against the Vikings when they ran too high. Those were very good passing formations, while bunch wasn't as good as we hoped, because that is the best formation that we wanted to run. And so we also wanted to look at, what do the Vikings shut down? Our concepts that we want to run, what are they good at beating? Well, drive and levels and flood were both very, very, very well stopped by the Vikings. Now, obviously, similar to the formations, we're not going to put too much stock into this when designing our play, when designing our game plan, but it is something to look for, and we might run a little bit more dagger and Yankee and Hoss and Shock, because those are positive EPA per play plays against the Vikings when they're in a too high shell.
Another thing that we loved about Buffalo is how multiple they are in terms of their personnel usage. They can win from 11 personnel, which is when you've got one tight end and one running back. They can both run and pass out of that. Victor was getting into earlier, running out of spread formations. We're going to have success there. Then 12 personnel, you put an extra tight end on the field. This is kind of our play action package. They are highly effective passing out of 12 personnel. Then 13, three tight ends on the field, just going heavy. If we have a too high matchup against 13 personnel, just going to run the ball down their throats. Numbers bear that out. And then Buffalo's pass concepts. Yankee, super effective concept from Buffalo, also super effective against too high. Drive and levels, another too high beating staple that Buffalo runs really well. We're going to be able to run our game plan against too high using the Bills passing attack.
Yeah, like he was talking about, the Bills run everything we wanted to do very well. The Vikings, we really wanted to boil down their defensive tendencies, how we think they're going to attack us. We think they're going to start out a lot in nickel against the pass. That's what they do the most. That's what they're the most comfortable in. Obviously, they're the league leading team in too high usage. We expect to see a lot of too high out of them. We expect to see it mostly from nickel and base, and we expect to see a lot of good play from them. We are going to design our game plan around that.
So kind of recapping what I said earlier, Bills are very effective out of 12 and 13 personnel, which experiences a lot of success against too high. They are just great at beating it overall, run and pass alike. And even though the sample size is small, they execute concepts like Yankee, which is when you've got a vert and a deep cross, dagger, flood, and curl flats at a high level. We have too high answers with the Buffalo Bills.
How are we going to beat them? As I said, we think they're going to start a lot in nickel and too high. What are we going to do? We know Minnesota is not very good at defending the run from nickel, especially against RPOs. We are going to run the ball into the ground as much as we can when they come out in nickel and the too high. We're also going to pass the ball a reasonable amount, but we're going to run until they will not let us anymore. We're going to use our tried and true concepts against too high, dagger, Hank, Yankee, drive, all of that stuff. We're going to use that, stick to that, beat them on the ground until they prove to us they can stop it.
Their counter is going to be coming out in a base defense. When they get into base, we're still going to run the ball. We're going to run a little bit more play action. However, we are going to go to the run pass option game. That is a major weakness for the Vikings, and we're going to pick on it all day.
However, if they decide to switch to one high coverage, we can switch to our concepts that are proven to beat one high and our play actions that work better against one high compared to two high.
And also, scrambling is a very effective way to beat one high. Buffalo was one of the best teams in terms of EPA per play when scrambling, and the Vikings ranked one of the worst teams against scrambles in the league, and scrambles work the best against one high rather than too high. We've got Josh Allen, we're going to use him.
Lastly, we've got our play design, bunch left slot motion, 50Z dagger. So this play is weaponizing two of our most effective pass concepts against too high defenses. On the right side, we have a shock look, you could call it, with a Y corner at about 12 yards. And then we have a sit route coming in behind him. QB is going to be executing a three-step drop, synced with that break at the corner route, and he is reading the stress defender. They're either throwing over his head or throwing to the chains. Then, if that's not open, pivots to shoulders, looks to the backside. This is a pure progression play, and he's looking at dagger. He is looking to rip that dig route. If that's taken away as well, then you progress to the running back on a juke route. That's also going to be our hot option. One thing I like about this play, we start in bunch left, which is a formation that's good against too high. However, the Vikings are good at defending it. Then we motion the slot into more of a twins look. We're going to stress both sides of the field. This has answers against everything. A whole bunch of too high beaters there for quarters, for cover two. And if you do disguise it, we have answers for cover three. We're going to attack the seams. It's explosive. It's high percentage. Best of all worlds.
That is all from us. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I would say I really appreciate the fact that you guys addressed how defenses adjust with the disguised look and how you guys would address that. I thought that was a good next step thinking. So good job on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I have a similar comment. That one of the things, this is not super analytical, but one of the things that I love about the game of football is the game theory aspect, right? You have one plan, you're going to think about what they're doing, they're going to think about what you're doing, and then it's all like how it all comes together. So I appreciate that you guys talked quite a bit through the various different possibilities, right? Of we have this idea, and if they come out like this, then we're going to try something like this. I think most people here have done some amount of team-based work, including, Kevin obviously still with the team. But when you are, let's say you're a coach, this is the exact type of conversation that happens. It's, we suggest this play call. Here is why we suggest it. Here is what we think is going to happen. This is what we think they do. If they do this, these are some of our possibilities to react to their changes. And so wanted to give a quick shout out that is real life, like that is exactly what type of things happen in these kind of meetings. So yeah, really appreciate the work that went into kind of where you guys came from and then the end outcome. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Piggybacking on that a little bit, I just appreciated like the energy and sort of confidence in knowing what you were talking about. Like especially in presentations like this, they can get really numbers heavy and all that kind of stuff, and just the extent to which you knew what you were talking about and sort of brought the confidence and enthusiasm. Like that's a big part of just like communicating ideas. And I could definitely tell that you guys had a lot of prep and really knew what you were talking about, which is a big deal for this kind of thing. Um, you mentioned about the small sample size for some of the like route specific stuff for the teams. Like how small of sample are we talking here?
So for the formations, for the concepts, at least the Vikings against those specific concepts, I think it varied from like 20 plays to 70 plays. So obviously the 20 plays is a small sample size, but 70 we feel pretty decent about extrapolating meaningful results from that. But we kind of wanted to put some emphasis on that because it was a smaller sample size, but also really stick to what we found in part two as the hitting point, and then use that to kind of nudge us in a different direction with our game plan. There are specific tendencies. That's not what we were going off of 100%.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Can you guys elaborate a little bit more? I would like to call out of the RPO approach. So tell me a little bit how you kind of came across that finding and how it sort of weighed against potentially other avenues that you considered going down.
Well, initially, I looked at RPO tags, I guess you could call them, on run plays. So you have some maybe bubble screen action on one side of the formation. However, it's not thrown, it's a give. I figured, that's an easy thing to look at. Does just adding that pass option make runs better even if you don't throw the ball? And I found pretty conclusively yes. I think the difference was 0.06 EPA, which over a full season sample size is pretty substantial. And then Victor, you looked more into the RPO pass angle things.
Yeah, so we also found that passes worked really well. Whenever we sorted drop type by RPO, we were able to see that the passing EPA really didn't differ too much against too high when you're just running a straight drop back or play action versus RPOs. Especially against too high, RPOs were very good at attacking them. So we really were we didn't really think we were going to find that, but when we found that and over a very large sample size, we really decided that's going to be a big part of our game plan.
Cool. Nice job, guys.